Hello and welcome to an episode of the Manufactured Leaders Podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. Today, we welcomed on John Doyle, an operations manager in the agricultural industry. Today's episode reminded me that leadership doesn't have to be lonely, because it is a job that can be if you don't prepare properly. It was all about using the people around you, setting KPIs, setting the right KPIs for your business and your shared goal, and actually leaving a legacy and how important that is to John. We talked about all things leadership. We talk about how to accelerate through management. John is someone who has accelerated his career at an exponential rate and gave some really good tips and advice how to do that and how to lean into imposter syndrome, lean into your strengths and weaknesses. And it's one of those episodes where you're going to take a lot of tangible tips away how to become a much better leader. And obviously we talk about all things manufacturing. So really enjoyed this episode. I learned a lot. Thank you very much, John. So please do me a favor, grab a coffee, watch, listen, whatever you want to do. And please just click that like and subscribe and even comment. It means the world to me. It really helps grow the channel. So thank you very much. Enjoy. Right, a massive warm welcome today to John Doyle, a operations professional in the agricultural industry. So John, welcome to Manufacturing Leaders. How are we doing?
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So first question is the same question I ask everyone who comes on. What does it mean to you to be a leader?
To be a leader to me, so it's really cheesy, but I always think of just a good leader or a leader is just someone who changes something. So changes the way a process or a culture exists and then leaves it for the better, whether that's 8 hours after the shift or 8 years down the line, being able to walk away or sense check a place that you still work and go, have I left that better? Has it improved? What's the culture like? Have the people, have improved their lives? Have I improved the metrics? And how good a leader you are, I guess, depends on how big that effect is. So if you can walk away from a business and 7 years later, let's say, go back and it's still standing from some of the processes and the implementations you put in place, then that's a great leader, and that's the kind of leader I would like to be one day. And if you're a supervisor that just makes their shift better and makes their week better, then that's fine too. It just depends where you want to fall on that line, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. I guess on a very deep level, you're talking about legacy, aren't you? Really, however you sort of class it as. Is that legacy piece then? Is that important for you in all aspects of life? What do you say, or do you just see that in business? Because
no, I think so. Absolutely. If you can keep not to get too deep too quickly, but even with my children, you want to be able to look back and say sense check, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, and sort of say what kind of a difference have I made over this period of time, and your ability to look back and say you made a difference. Not only does it fill you with a sense of worth, but it makes you a stronger leader going forward, because actually you gain confidence from all the celebrations of successes and quick wins and doing this right and doing that right and achievements at every level. It gives you that confidence to push yourself forward. And without that, if you sense check yourself 6 months into an appointment, let's say, and you think, actually, do you know what? Things haven't really changed here. The best I've done is sort of firefighted for a couple of months, and we've got past some problems, but we haven't changed anything or improved anything, and I haven't had an impact on this culture or these people's lives. Are you going to go into your next appointment or into the next 6 months of the same appointment with an amount of confidence that you need to do that job properly?
Yeah. And that's probably where management has changed over time now, that people go into leadership now for different reasons. I guess it's more selfless to some extent. I mean, you could argue,
yeah, absolutely,
you're still getting the buzz, if you like, from helping other people, and that's your buzz. But I think you no longer see many people go into leadership for an ego type thing, and you know what I mean. I think that is
of course,
got to change over time, I think.
But I think, but even if you're like myself, I'm driven for my own wants and needs as much as the people in and around me. But without any successes or without anything tangible to be able to take into an interview, or if you're looking for your next step up, or if you're looking for your next role, you're not going to get anything tangible without the people in and around you. If you don't bring up the people in and around you, the chances of you having success individually, it's not going to happen without making the site successful or the business successful or the department successful. Your CV is not going to improve any, because you won't have anything to show for it.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to go back to, because you've done a great deal in a short space of time. You've progressed very, very well at a young age. And I think that's an important lesson there. Take us right back to where and why you started into, I guess, the manufacturing industry as a whole.
Okay, so I just fell into the industry, is the honest answer, in my early 20s. And I've had a strange sort of career, really, because I sat in the same sort of role, a similar sort of role for 10 years, from 20 to sort of 30, 31. And it was comfortable. And I look back on it now and think probably I got too comfortable. But at the time, it was all those sort of those housekeeping things we look for when we apply for a job in the first place. It's close to my home, the shifts work for my family, I get to spend time with my children. There's enough autonomy, but not too much. There's enough structure there. But yeah, the 10 years in amongst the same business, really. And then just one day, just a switch, just sort of said, this is not enough for me. It's got stale almost. And actually, the business I was working on at the time was a fairly progressive, fairly well-known business. But part of the problem is similar to, I guess, a football player or a sports person that has to move teams just to make an impact, because actually the business might be okay and you might be a very good leader, and I'd consider myself to be, but that relationship's just grown a little bit stale. So I made the decision sort of 30, 31, 19 years ago now, to move on, take another challenge, a little bit of a different industry, but nonetheless manufacturing. And yeah, it just paid dividends. So sort of every 2 or 3 years from that point, I've managed to progress into more senior roles, because it becomes addictive, is the honest answer. You have a little bit of taste of success and you look back on your achievements or the things that you've managed to accomplish with the help of others, and actually it just becomes addictive and you want more and more and more of it. And so it kind of snowballed to the point where I am now. I'm 39 years old and I'm still looking for my next success, my next big achievement.
Yeah. Why do you think some people do get stale doing a job like that versus other people who couldn't, I guess, think of anything worse than doing anything different to what they're doing? Is that a makeup of someone or your experience?
I think so. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it really depends where you are in your personal life as well. So that work-life balance. I think of my work-life balance back then, and it was very much tainted towards my home life. And that wasn't a bad thing at the time, but does it fulfill you? Does it make you go home and feel like you've achieved something? Probably not.
Yeah.
And I think it depends who you surround yourself with as well. Probably at that time when I made the decision to change companies and to change out mindsets, for want of a better word, I was surrounded by some good people who had a similar mindset. And actually, I've got a couple of friends and a couple of colleagues in and around that time that made changes, both internal and external. And you kind of go, you know what, I want a piece of that. That's what I want my life to look back. I don't want to be sat in 5 years. As much as I'm comfortable, it's sort of akin to that, the lobster boiling in a pot. Not to over dramatize it, but you can get so comfortable that actually you look back in 5 years and you think I've crossed that line of comfort and gone into stagnation. Yeah. But surround yourself with good people and sort of, almost that competitive edge of wanting to keep up with the people around you. If you surround yourself with the right people, that's kind of what pushed me forward.
What do you think the pros and cons are in terms of either staying where you are and progressing? Because I guess you get some people, particularly back in the day, with job for life and you progress and progress. You get probably more people now that move for progression. I would say that's probably a much bigger percentage. You obviously move for that progression. What do you think the pros and cons are of both, would you say?
So the biggest con, and it's not a romantic one, but it's all that local knowledge. Every time you leave a business, even if it's a similar business within the similar industry, those day-to-day stuff, the systems in the background, where to the apps for your HR systems, all these little boring things that make the day-to-day. Losing that just sets you back. It's an amount of knowledge that you lose. And if you can't take it with you, and sometimes you might get lucky and a good percentage of it is transferable, but more often than not, in my experience, actually you lose a lot of that. And it just slows your roll. It just slows your momentum, because there's an amount of time that it takes to just pick up all that local knowledge. And that's time that if you stay within the same company for 10, 15 years and the progression's there, you haven't got that drag. You haven't got that weight pulling you back. You can just concentrate on the interesting things or the things that add value. Whereas, like say, changing, and again, even people building relationships, again, there's a certain weight to that. If you've known people 10 years, you know how they work, what they're good at, how their strengths offset your weaknesses and vice versa. There's a certain element of momentum to that. And if you change businesses, you've got to find that again, and you've got to find it quickly. And it takes a lot of energy as well. It's tiring. It can be quite intense to go into another business and throw yourself at it for the first 6 months to get past all that little bits of local knowledge that you need, absolutely. But is that why you're there? Is that what you came to do? Not, probably not. So that's the main pro of staying with the same business, I would say.
Yeah, because it's interesting because I hear a lot of people now who go, well, new generation don't like to stay anywhere more than 2, 3 years. They want to move on and so on and so forth. And you don't get the job for life mindsets anymore. I don't actually think that's the case personally. I think that people want more now and people want more out of their career and they want to work for a business which helps them progress, but they're less likely to stay if those opportunities aren't on the table. So I personally think it's more of a case of companies just aren't set up right for that progression piece and lose people because of that. That's my thoughts anyway.
No, and I would agree with that. I've worked at businesses that are, for want of a better word, complacent, and actually they got you there. And I can think of numerous examples in my earlier years where people have definitely been passed over because they're so good at the role, because of that square peg for a square hole, that actually it's held them back. And I say complacency and I say talk about comfort, but the other side of comfort, the really positive side of comfort from an employee's point of view, is knowledge. And you're an asset. If you've been there 10 years, even by osmosis, you normally pick up enough to be really added value. And I've seen that hold people back, and that's the dangerous side of it. But I've also worked at companies. Luckily, to the one I'm working at now, there is room for progression, and succession planning is second to none. And actually, you can see that route. And I don't think necessarily it is a case that jumping companies is the right answer. You just got to be able to see that succession route. It's as simple as that. You've got to be able to see there's a plan. You've got to do that gap analysis in amongst all the firefighting, the day-to-day and the short interval control. You've got to make time and go, actually, this is where I want to be in 2 years. What am I doing day-to-day to work on that gap? What knowledge do I need to go into my next role or to add more value to this business? And is the business helping me do that? Yeah. And the best businesses right now are learning that lesson, and they're learning the lesson that the cost involved with that 10, 20 years ago was almost enough to put people off, in my opinion. Certainly, massive businesses, not just the smaller independent ones, where they would go, right, well, we can get you to this level, but it's going to cost us time. It's going to take you off the shop floor. You're going to have to train. And they would offset those costs versus bringing someone in who was ready-made, and 9 times out of 10 go with the experience. I think more and more people are seeing the value of internal training now, internal progression, and offsetting that against, we might have to pay, if we're bringing in a CEO at 125 grand a year, we're going to pay 10, 15% of that to find him. Have we got someone underneath him that we can bring up? Yeah. And that's the decision I would tend to make 9 times out of 10. Every role that I've left for the last 7 years has been succeeded by my successor. Nice. So my direct report has taken over my role, and I consider that one of my greatest successes, because that's how it should be. And that's not to say that we've lost anything from bringing an external candidate in, because actually the way I look at it more and more these days is, yes, an external candidate may have a skill set and a knowledge that an internal candidate has, but actually it's easy to go and get that. So we think about bringing in external candidates and then getting in the local knowledge, and that's fairly doable. You can put someone on a 12-week training program, let's say, and all of a sudden they're up to speed. But what we don't look at often enough, in my opinion, is, let's say we've got an operative on the shift and she's not had any managerial experience. Let's just go and get her, and then she might have all that local knowledge. Probably sometimes it's easier to it's easier to find that external knowledge and train someone internal than it is the other way around. Mm-hmm. And that's the big switch that I see over the last sort of 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is it. There is a gap which is widening in manufacturing. That succession plan just is a real failure, and has been. It's been coming this for years and years. So now's the time to concentrate on your retention. Now's the time to concentrate on your training, because I think you've hit the nail on the head. You've got to have continuous training internally, so for when key people leave, that person below them is just ready to step up and then step up and step up. And that's why apprentices are important, all this type of stuff just been neglected, hasn't it? And companies then will say, we're paying X amount of fees on recruitment and training. Well, of course you are, because you're paying it right at the top end. When, if you had an organic process, that wouldn't need to happen. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the weight behind it as well. So we, I think about the amount of times at previous businesses we would talk about, your 4 or 5 main KPIs, and it'd always be the same sort of KPIs that would pop up in and around health and safety, in and around yield and preventative maintenance. But actually, in terms of staff retention, how often do you talk about that? Probably HR have conversations, and you'll have a conversation once a quarter. But it should be one of the most weightiest KPIs you've got. We should be talking day to day, week to week. What's our staff retention? Not just staff retention, but of the staff that we've retained, how many are fit for purpose? And actually, in terms of one-to-ones and where these staff members have projected they want to be, how many of them are obtaining that, and how many are miles off it, years off it, and what we're doing to shorten that gap.
Yeah, I completely agree. That most operations or HR will know exactly what their recruitment fees are, their training fees are, but how many can go, I know exactly what my retention rate is versus what it was last year. That's so much more important, because that's where your money's saved.
Yeah, absolutely.
I completely agree. It bleeds into culture, I guess, doesn't it, in terms of the importance of culture in a business. And I know I've spoken before about the sort of the importance of the KPI piece, which massively differs business to business. Is that something that you've always looked and thought it's important to implement, I guess, when you go into a new business, perhaps in a new senior sort of management role?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason I stay and plan to stay in the agriculture industry for the hopefully until I retire. One of the reasons I love this industry is you get a lot more autonomy than you would in certain industries, and a little bit more accountability, absolutely, but certainly more autonomy. And if things are working, you can sort of come away from people and compartmentalize departments and sort of say that, I'm here to support, absolutely, but that is your baby. And you only do that if people know what the structure is. You only do that if they've got smart targets and they know what's expected day to day. And that's kind of where the KPIs, for me, are beneficial in terms of the culture. You can walk around, you can probably do a day, let's say, at most companies, all different companies all across the UK. And if you spend a day there as like you're doing a day in the factory, like Greg Wallace, let's say, the culture by the end of it. You get an idea of the culture, whether it's whatever metric, health and safety, performance culture, staff morale, all these things that we look for day to day. 24 hours in a company, you know what the culture is. Mm-hmm. But actually making that tangible and putting that to a figure is the difficult part, and making sure that every operative from shop floor to senior manager knows what is expected in terms of what that metric is, what that measurable target is. That's the difficulty. And without that, you can't expect autonomy. You can't expect them to be accountable. The most difficult sites that I've gone into over the last sort of 15, 20 years actually are the ones that are coasting but don't know they're coasting. They think everything's fine because for 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, no one's told them any different. And that's so difficult. Once you get into that ingrained sort of stoic, well, this is how we've always done it, it's so difficult. And without making specific KPIs to offset the culture you want, it's almost impossible. It can't be conversations. It can't just be, let's get together and talk about what we expect. It's got to be structured and measured, and they've got to sort of know it and see it every day. Otherwise, you just drift. And as soon as a culture drifts and gets into that lack of performance culture where you just don't know you're coasting, it's the most difficult thing to iron out, because you've got 40, 50 operatives on a site, let's say, that have been told they're doing an okay job for 10 years. You get someone like me that comes in and says, actually, this is not okay. And it's far from okay. And this is what we expect. And this is what we're going to do to help you achieve it. It's a difficult conversation to have.
I completely agree. If you don't know what good looks like, how are you supposed to know what good looks like? It's simple as
absolutely. That, and I think a lot of sites do that as well. A lot of businesses do that. Ask that question: what does good look like? Yeah. And the problem that I see more often than not is when they talk about what good looks like, they're talking about what good looked like there.
Yeah.
It's if I go for a 5-a-side kickabout tonight, I look okay amongst my friends, but my friends are terrible. So if you go then try and walk up for Old Trafford, you look terrible, and it's an awkward conversation to have. And as soon as you have that conversation, or you need to have that conversation, you lose the interest of a lot of people. So you can't let it get to that point. But it's not just what good looks like here. It's what does good look like across the UK? If you're making Mars bars, what does good look like at Nestle? But what does good look like at Dairy Milk? What does good look like at Kraft? These are the questions you need to ask. It's not about what you expect because of what's gone before. It's about what can we reasonably achieve and how far are we away from it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's setting those expectations, those standards, isn't it? And people can, and it actually makes it easier to manage. We're very KPI heavy now. We didn't used to be years ago. And I found it hard to manage because I was almost managing emotionally and off gut. And I personally find it very difficult to be negative for an underperformance. I found that those conversations hard. I'm much better right now, but I did. But managing my numbers is such an easier way to manage, isn't it? Because it
absolutely
does it for you. What does good look like for you? You're in a new business tomorrow, and let's say you're doing a very similar role to what you're doing now, agriculture industry. What are the main KPIs that you're going to be asking? What do they do now, and looking for to improve them? Would you say?
I think in most businesses, you start at quality. You start at the best employees that I've worked for start at the customer and work backwards. And that's a really basic thing to say, but it's very difficult to do actually, because you get caught in your own little world and you get caught in your department or your job, and you don't look at the holistic approach and say, this is the best. If I do my job to the best of the abilities, it's going to affect my department only. But that one unit flow, how is it affecting the next department, and how does that ultimately lead back to the customer? That's the view you need to take. And if you take that view, you come back, you start from the customer, you go quality, right? Okay, so we need quality, we need on time, we need in full deliveries, and you just follow that back through the process. And with the help of leaning on the guys on the shop floor that know, going off, data sheets and getting the data trending, you set specific targets. But the most important part of it is making sure not just that they're achievable, but actually that they mean something to the person involved. And that's where I think KPIs fall away sometimes, is if it's just a number that you have to hit, it loses something. It's got to be a target that you've decided together. You've got the group, or you've got the department, you've got the operative one-on-one almost, and you've created that target together. And it's got to stretch them as well. That's the other thing we do. It's very easy. I've worked at businesses where the KPIs have been hit for 5 years and everyone's sort of happy, but again, you're coasting and the machines are not at their maximum tons per hour. Let's say you're not stretching or not putting under stress, but you're not testing, you're not letting the guys on the shift work to the best of their ability, and they're not achieving anything. They're not feeling like they're breaking records or feeling like they're adding value, because actually they're just ticking boxes the same way they've ticked boxes for the last 6 months, 6 years, and that's what good looks like to me. Is, are we pushing ourselves? Are we making quality product? Are we getting it on time, in full? Are we thinking about energy resources? Is it sustainable? That's the main thing. So when I say sustainable, I don't necessarily mean from an environmental point of view. I mean, it's very easy to throw a lot of work at a process, or a process or a work instruction, let's say, or a part of a manufacturing chain. And if you just fault find in that area, you can normally improve something. You throw people, you throw the time, and you throw the effort at a process, and you can root and cause analysis, and you can make it better. That's fine. But then if you take that away the next day, is it still performing? And if you leave it a week on its own and you stand alone in a month, is it still performing? And that's kind of what I look for in terms of a KPI is it sustainable? Is it, when I come away from it and all these short interval control improvements that we put in place, when all these improvements are in place and we take them away, is it going to be there, and is it going to work? And is there enough control in that area so that the operative's got accountability and we can just leave them to it?
Apologies for interrupting this podcast with a very quick 30-second description of my business. Theo James are an engineering and manufacturing recruitment search firm based in Durham. We specialise in contract and permanent opportunities, from blue-collar, semi-skilled roles right the way up to C-suite level exec positions. If you're looking for any new additional staff or new opportunity for yourself in the industry, please contact me or the team. There'll be a specialist in your area waiting to help. I'm incredibly proud of this business and what we've built since our inception in 2015, and I would love to extend that service out to you. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the episode. Kind of links in with that vision, doesn't it? In terms of what you're talking about there is a goal which they're all aligned to. I've been talking to a lot of people recently about vision in business because I think manufacturing is a little bit behind the times from some businesses, I would say. And I was challenged recently because I thought we had a vision, and then someone challenged me to say, if you got all your members of staff in, give them a piece of paper and a pen, write down what the vision is, would they all be aligned? I was like, fair point. They would have some idea, but they wouldn't be exactly on point with what the vision is. And it gave me a good challenge to do so. How progressive do you think manufacturing is with that type of world, would you say? And can it help?
I think it can help. I think it more often not becomes a footnote, and you've got to make sure that it is not just propaganda. So every vision is normally some acronym stuck on a wall somewhere, and that's fine. And it's always the same sort of values, and they're always worthwhile values. But actually, the more important point is that this is the company's vision, especially if you've got a multinational company that has got different arms in different areas, and you've got a strategic vision that encompasses all that. That's fantastic. But what does that mean at any given level? And it's about making sure that individuals have got goals, individuals have got a vision. So that department might have a vision that ties into the overall vision, or that site, if you're multi-site, where do you play a part in that vision? And what does that tangibly look like? People more and more now want something they can hold in the hand. They want something they can see. They want something that, okay, so we want to be brave. 9 times out of 10, someone's got a vision. The word brave's in there. What does that mean? Where does my accountability lie? What sort of remit have I got? What can I control and what can I not? And where do you want to ask those questions? And they're the conversations day to day. Have a vision, absolutely. Have a strategic goal and have an end game. But make sure that every person at every level for that business knows what it tangibly means to them day to day and how they can affect that. And once you have those conversations, it becomes a little bit less like propaganda and more like something that we can work towards.
Yeah, you've nailed it. It's like the NASA thing analogy, isn't it? When they ask the cleaner what she do, and she says, "I help put a man on the moon." Do you know what I mean? It's that whole piece. But that you could quite easily argue that's like fluffy because I agree with you. What does it mean to someone who works on the shop floor? Because
absolutely.
And that is the problem, isn't it? Most time you look at a big wall and you go, they're nice, but what does it mean? But if that can tie back to every single person at organization and they benefit from it, then it works. But
and you've got to back it up as well. You've got to literally, I think it's certainly a managerial level, where that's first line manager, the site manager, let's say multi-site manager. You need to be able to back that up. And actually, so I use brave as an example. If you're asking someone to be brave enough to ask questions, brave enough to have ideas, brave enough to say, I'm not happy with that. Yeah. When they do that, you've got to absolutely every single time make sure that you action that. Yeah. And that you have a conversation or a piece of work off the back of it. Even if that piece of work is to say, yeah, we've looked into your comment and actually we're not going to progress it. Well, thank you. And this is what we're going to do going forward off the back of what you said. Too many times these ideas, if you like, are put into people's minds, and the more progressive, the new, the interested, and the really worthwhile sort of strong followers, to pick a type, they jump on board. Yeah. But every time that they're unheard, trying to progress these values, trying to make a difference, they just fall away. And there's a certain amount of weight that comes with energy, so that if you constantly trying to bring up new ideas, or you're trying to improve the workplace for someone else or for yourself, every time you get knocked back, you lose a little bit of energy for it. And then sort of these are the people that you might go into a business and see have been there 15 years and actually are superstars, but they've just not been listened to. And it's because, not just because, but one of the issues might be because the vision doesn't relate to the day-to-day. They've got this vision, they see it, they think, I'll have a piece of that, I get what the business is trying to do, I want to help that day-to-day. But if they're not got the backing of their first line manager, then it's very difficult to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, 100%. I want to get your advice on how you sort of grow and accelerate into management roles, because there's a lot of people who want to be managers and they perhaps might not have the opportunities internally. They might have some real apprehension about stepping into management and leadership. What advice would you give someone to accelerate their management career like you have in terms of what you've done?
Do you know what I'd honestly say? Just don't be scared to be a bit cheeky. It's a bit of pull. So there's a bit of gap analysis there in terms of, and it's similar to the sort of firefighting equation, where if you just firefight your entire your entire week, your entire month. You never make stretch projects work because you just get bogged down in the firefighting. Similarly, if you're only thinking about being prolific in your role and training, let's say, or gaining knowledge in the areas that you deal with day to day, and not giving yourself that time to improve, you're probably not going to go too far. So I always try and find time and save a bit of time and energy for actually the role above me or a role that I want in 2 to 3 years. Let's say, what's the gap analysis? What do they do now that I can't do? What experiences have they got that I can't attest to? And how do I close that gap? And sometimes it comes to knocking on the door and saying, can I spend 15 minutes in this meeting? I've never been across this meeting. Or if someone's got a project that you find interesting, can you get involved in it and just pull in information so that, in 2 or 3 years or, 2 or 3 weeks, if that job becomes available that you've wanted for a while, you can go into that room and be confident that you've got the right to be there. One of the biggest issues I had after sort of going through 2 or 3 promotions or 4 promotions fairly quickly in sort of less than 10 years, you eventually you catch yourself up and you start to feel like an imposter because actually you've gone from sort of coasting for in my younger years to progressing quite quickly. And the best way to sort of get rid of that imposter syndrome is to know what you're doing day to day, but also lean into your weaknesses. And then you think about, all right, I don't know this, or I need this skill, I need this asset. Maybe I've not spent as much time in the HR side of things that I should have. Let's change that and let's set an amount of time, manage your time better so that you've got a period that you can go and spend some time with HR. You can jump on a course and you can improve your weaknesses or find people that offset your weaknesses and surround yourself with them so that you're just learning all the time. And it's difficult to do. It's just a very simple thing to say to educate yourself and progress to that next level. But what normally happens is, like me in my early 20s, you get caught in your actual job. Day to day, you just get caught in your job and you concentrate on becoming at what you know and what you're responsible for, when actually the way to progress is absolutely cover that and set a reputation of being someone who knows and can cover their role, but look above it and look to the side of it and think about, where do I want to be in 2 years and what's that gap I need to close.
Yeah, because management isn't for everyone, is it? It's a difficult
No,
job to get ready
absolutely.
for.
And it might not even be management. We've had some really good results, or I've had some really good results over the last 5 years that really off the wall stuff. So we've had people from an engineering background go into management, but we've also had people from analytical jobs and data processing that have gone, do you know what? I want to earn what an engineer earns. And
Yeah,
actually, because they've got a bit of knowledge of the site and they've got that local knowledge that I talk about that's so valuable and takes a lot of time to get. We've done that, and we've got people that have swapped roles completely and gone from office-based roles into plant-based roles, and it's worked really well because they bring a different viewpoint and they shed lights on areas that we haven't looked at, and they bring a different flavor to the pot, if you like. So it's just literally about not getting too tied down in your day to day. Absolutely, you need to cover that. But every now and again, one-to-ones, you've had a one-to-one to your boss. How many one-to-ones turn into a tick boxing exercise? And how many people have sat in one-to-one consultations or reviews and just thought about, I need to get back on the floor. I need to get back on my truck. I need to get back to my office. I've got a meeting tomorrow I need to crack on with. When actually set yourself that time and think and be brave and honest enough to say, this is what I want and I need you to help me get there. And the best managers will, because the best managers will realize that there's value in that.
Yeah, and you're right. It's we're in an interesting space right now as well because you're finding because of supply and demand, people. I think less people will put the hand up for management than they used to be because of the money situation. We've got vacancies for maintenance engineers at 50, 60 grand and maintenance managers at 50, 60 grand. Do you know what I mean? And that is the current space because there's such a demand for certain skill sets, and there isn't necessarily those demands for managers. They're getting paid the same, and it's a high. Both jobs have got pressure, but I would argue the managerial pressure is harder, personally.
Yeah, and it is interesting, and as I've done a couple of times, like when you change industries as well, the money changes for no other reason than the wealth of that industry. Some industries are much more affluent than others. If you work, animal feed is notoriously it's low margins but high volumes, and that's where you make money for animals. Very high volume but fairly low margin compared to the chemical industry. So it's about thinking about, sometimes it's not about the organization or the industry, it's about the people. If you find a good boss that progresses you and you've stuck with the boss, I'm lucky enough to have had some really good bosses. I've had some terrible ones, but more recently than not, I've had some fantastic bosses. And if you find an environment where you are constantly pushing yourself and you are thriving, whether it's into management or whether it's not, that's gold dust essentially.
Yeah.
That's the time when you go, right, I'll stick and I'll have conversations and I'll progress through this industry. But it's worthwhile me staying where I am because I've got that succession. I've got someone who believes in me, and I'm being paid for my worth. But it does come down to sometimes adding your own value. You know, it can't all be pull. You talk about businesses' responsibility to pay you a competitive wage and to progress and give you the training you need to add value to the business. But sometimes you've got to prove your worth. That's the other side of things. And I've had that, quite a few times where you've got to go, right, well, I come here primarily to be paid, love the job, love the people, but actually first train of thought is I need to be paid.
Yeah.
And I want to be in a place where I'm not available to be poached by other companies because I love working here. But in that situation, sometimes it's on the person, it's on the employee to prove your worth and to action the results and to show your successes and to celebrate your wins and to say, I'm adding value to this business and this is what I'm worth.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the businesses I've worked in where you see those gaps between, use the example of engineers, which is a really good one, whether it be engineers or HGV drivers that are difficult jobs and they're paid the same as managers or just a bit less. You've got to prove your worth and show that actually you add value more than that engineer. Otherwise, the business has sort of got every right to go, actually, at the moment, with the output that you're giving, we could lose you and it'd be a pain. We'd have to replace you, but we'd get away with it. Whereas if we lose our engineer, the site goes down. And you've got to be able to add the same amount of value as someone who is of that level.
Yeah, and that's still pressure, isn't it? And that's the thing. And normally, it gets back to what you said right at the start for you, that your values are aligned with leaving some form of legacy, even if you're there for a day or a week or a month. They're your values, and that's why for you, management's right because you're driven by that. You're driven by
Absolutely.
the difference.
And it's the one I think early on when I talk about doing sort of 10 years of supervisory level and just staying there. The thing that really got me out of that, not rut, I wouldn't use that word, but got me out of that mindset was I like to make changes. That's what I enjoy about working at a senior management level is I like to make changes. I like to be able to make big, long changes. The fast moving consumer goods at supervisor level, it's difficult to make an impact. You make an impact on the day to day, you make an impact on the weeks, but to change things and at a strategic level, at an operational level, it's very difficult and it takes big teams and it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of admin to be able to make changes and to be able to improve something from holistically from root up. That's what I like about this industry. That's what I like. That's what I enjoy day to day. I want to improve the day to day. And I like marginal gains as much as the next person. But actually, what really gets me out of bed in the morning is the thought of completely uprooting the process and making it improve and having 6, 7, 100 operatives go, do you know what? This is better. This works. And our lives are easier because of it. The customers are happier because of it. That excites me. And I think if you want to do that, you need to be at a managerial level.
Yeah, 100%. You led me into my next question, which is who's the best manager you've ever had and why, would you say? Got to pick one.
I have to pick one. So my previous manager, I've gone through a few managers last couple of years, but I worked for a guy in quite a progressive guy in the feed industry quite recently, a couple of years ago. And it's similar to me. Yeah, he wouldn't call himself an expert. He'd definitely call himself sort of someone with a knowledge of all bits and pieces of different things, but he wouldn't call him an expert in the field. But what he was very good at was getting the best out of a group of people and being able to uplift and pick a team almost and say, these are my superstars. These are the people I'm going to back. This is how I'm going to back you. And I mean, in a real short amount of time compared to what I'm used to. So I'm talking 6 months to 9 months in really taking a group of people that were working one way and saying, you've got more added value in this area. You can improve this. You can improve that. Get your test to get to a team. Whatever we needed, we'll back you. If it's training, I'll back you. If it's equipment, I'll back you. And then just working holistically. And that's kind of the approach I take now day to day. I lean on people. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in any particular field, but I like to think that I'm able to see the strengths in people around me and build up on their shoulders almost, and just get together in a room and say, look, this is the issue. This is what I think as a starting point. Let's go from there. But yeah, I won't mention his name because he's got a big enough ego as it is. But
You
yeah,
might listen.
that's the kind of manager I'd like to be. Someone that when there's an issue to be solved, it's not shut the door, get one or two people in behind a closed room, lack of communication. And I've worked with managers like that as well. Make a decision, make a quick decision, make the wrong decision, make a decision based on pressure rather than what is right for the customer and right for the staff. But yeah, something's gone wrong. Open door. Anyone who can add value, let's solve it together. Let's solve it quickly, but let's solve it structured. Let's not be too rushed with it. And at the end of it, if it works, perfect. And actually, if it doesn't work, be brave enough to go, do you know what? It's not working. Let's go in a different direction.
Yeah, love it. And just finally, John, what's happening in the industry right now? Because there'll be people listening to this who maybe not worked in the agricultural industry. Manufacturing's up and down right now. So there's some challenges there, should we say? What's happening in this industry at the moment?
It's very similar to a lot of industries, to be fair. I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have in agriculture. As the same challenges that all manufacturers having is that it's very difficult to be brave. I've talked a lot about being progressive and making stock changes, but when raw materials costs are at an all-time high and the market margins are low, and energy is at a price that no one saw 15, 20 years ago. If you had sort of told me that I'd be paying 100K for the site that I manage now in terms of energy a month 10 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah.
And when those metrics change and when the economy where it is, it's very difficult then to be challenging, to be progressive. It was easier 5 or 10 years ago to make big projects stick because there was a little bit of slack there. Every business had that little bit of risk, that room for maneuver. Whereas now, if you make a mistake on shift or if you make a mistake at a capex level, the payback's going to take 10, 15 years longer than it did before. So it's very similar risks, I think, to most industries. Raw material prices, energy, and generally just keeping up with the economy. And actually the changing consumer market in terms of what people want from food. We look at the rise in vegetarians, the rise in vegans, that affects us. And it's about diversifying and looking at all the same stuff that most industries are looking at. Can we make more byproducts? Can we be circular? Can we be more sustainable? And trying to think about where we are in 10, 15, 25 years, whereas probably in this industry in the 90s, in the early 2000s, you're looking 5, 10 years ahead, whereas now we've got to be brave enough to look 25 years ahead.
Yeah, excellent. It's interesting because there are so many challenges, but there's opportunities. Like you say,
Yeah, absolutely.
the landscape changes, but it brings opportunities with it. And I think that for me, that's been one of the nice takeaways for today. I always like to think of my own takeaways. I often, like I did today, forget I'm on a podcast and just sort of learn and listen. And I've learned a lot from you. And I think probably my biggest takeaway, it's reminded me that leadership doesn't need to be lonely because everything you've talked about is that collaboration piece, whether that's the KPIs, the vision piece, the making decisions, even from an early age. It was obvious for you that it was all about the people around you who were going to help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were going to facilitate those people. And then you were going to leave that legacy of someone who does that. And I think that's a real key takeaway for me. And I'm sure other people listening that it doesn't have to be lonely leadership. You've got
No,
to
and I think you're absolutely right. And I would add to that when it becomes lonely, that's when there has been times where it has been lonely. You feel isolated. You feel like the man in the tower. That's when you're at risk of making poor decisions. If you make a poor decision, it's normally, unless you're an expert, and even if that point you've made a good decision in isolation, you still need to make sure the communication's right. You still need to get the buy-in of the guys. You still need to get the buy-in of the people on the floor so that they can enforce what you want them to do. But it's normally if I've made a bad decision, if I've made a decision that I've had to recant a week, 2 months, a year later, I look back and I think it's probably one I've made on my own. Whereas the decisions I've made holistically, the decisions I've made as a team with leaning on expertise in and around me, they normally more often than not work out really, really well. And it's just, it's trial and error. If something works, keep doing it and leaning on people. As long as you've got the right people in place, you're never going to go too far wrong, really.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's like humility, isn't it? To be fine with making mistakes, holding your hand up and being honest. I think that's the greatest change of leadership I think I've seen in the last 10 years. I really do.
Yeah, definitely. And then it's about how far you go with that as well. So I talk about the internal people, but external as well. My number one bugbear with bad managers that I've had is that duplication of work. There's nothing worse than doing a piece of work, a process, a project. You spend three days, 3 months, 3 weeks, whatever it is on that project, and you find out it's been done. It's been done, and not only has it been done in another site, either internally or externally, but it's been done better than you because it's been done by an expert. I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel. If it's been done, it's been done well. Let's save that time and let's take best practice from other areas and implement it where we work, and then we can use that time for something else.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been great, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
No, enjoyed it, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Manufacturing Leaders podcast. It absolutely means the world to me. Please let me know if you need any assistance. As a business, we look at providing partnerships with manufacturing engineering companies to really help their recruitment and retention. On the recruitment piece, anywhere from blue collar, semi-skilled staff, right the way up to C-suite level executive appointments, but also much more than that. We run events, so please let me know if you're interested in any of those. If you are interested, indeed, becoming a podcast guest, be very, very keen to speak to you as well. More than happy to do so. But as a business, as I say, we look at key partnerships to really help your recruitment, your retention, your marketing, your training. We really believe in the partnership piece and being an extension of your business. So we're very proud to work in this sector. I love manufacturing engineering, and my staff are just as passionate about it as I am. So thank you once again for listening. Please get in touch to talk about anything we can do to help. Look forward to speaking to you very soon. Thank you.